The first time it happened, I thought she was joking. I was spooning lukewarm applesauce into her mouth while the afternoon sun painted golden bars across the living room carpet. She sat there in her favorite chair, worn down at the arms where her fingers used to fidget during Wheel of Fortune. Her eyes looked at me, right at me, and then beyond me, as if I were a shadow she couldn't place. "Are you the nurse?" The air left my lungs in a soft, stupid laugh. "Very funny, Ma." She blinked. A slow, deliberate blink, like the kind you'd see in a cat pretending not to care. "I don't need help eating. You can tell her I said that." And just like that, she turned her head away and stared out the window at the cherry tree blooming far too early that year. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just listened to the ticking clock on the mantel and the sound of birds that she once named by call. I tried again, gently. "Ma. It's me. Danny." She looked back at me, face pinched. Confused. "Danny," she repeated slowly. "No. Danny's just a little boy. My son. He's—" She stopped. Her hand floated up as if trying to grasp a thought. "He's off somewhere. With his little blue rain boots." My heart gave a twitch. I hadn't worn those in 30 years. I didn't correct her. I couldn't. When I was younger, my mother used to say I was born during a thunderstorm, and that was why I never liked silence. I needed noise, TV, music, or my own thoughts churning loud in my head. She used to call me her storm child. Sometimes with pride. Sometimes with worry. She raised me alone. My father was gone before I could ever ask why. She never talked about him, and I never pushed, until I turned 12 and needed something to punch. I asked her if he had died. "No," she said. "But he might as well have." That was the end of it. Now she was the one vanishing, piece by piece, in front of me. I moved back into the house 6 months ago, when her diagnosis turned serious. It started small, forgetting her purse in the fridge, pouring salt into her coffee, calling the neighbor's dog by my name. But it escalated. I came home one night to find her sitting in the dark, every faucet in the house running full blast, humming a song I didn't recognize. The doctor said it was early onset, and aggressive. She was 62. Most nights she slept curled like a child in her twin bed, clutching a pillow like it might float her through dreams. I slept in my old room across the hall. The walls still had the faint outline of posters I'd once pinned up: Kurt Cobain, a faded Bulls championship print, and that old NASA shuttle diagram I used to stare at when I couldn't sleep. She'd wake me sometimes, shuffling down the hallway, whispering nonsense like, "Where's the lemon cake?" or, "Did you feed the turtles?" And I'd get up. Always. I'd guide her gently back, tuck her in, and sit by her side until she dozed off again. She'd mumble things in her sleep, names I didn't know: Jude, Mary, Eva. Once, I swear, she said, "Forgive me." Then came the dream. She told me about it one morning, completely lucid. A clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. "I had the most strange dream, Danny," she said while I helped her put on her cardigan. Her hands were trembling less that day. "Yeah? We were in a garden. You were playing with a kite, but the string had snapped. You were chasing it across the sky, laughing." Her voice wavered. "And I kept calling you. But not Danny." She paused, eyes narrowing like she was trying to pull something from deep water. "I called you Tomas." The way she said it, it wasn't just a name. It was a key to something. A crack in the world. I laughed nervously. "That's weird. We don't know any Tomas." She looked up sharply. "But you turned around. You looked at me." My skin prickled. And you said, 'I remember, Mama. I remember everything.'" That night I lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. Tomas. I googled it, obviously. Dead ends. No family names. No middle names. No secrets in the family tree I could find. Just my name, Daniel Paul Ellison, and a mother who once worked as a school librarian and carried the smell of jasmine and old paper everywhere she went. I wanted to believe it was a fluke. A leftover from a book she read, or maybe a soap opera. But the next night she said it again. In her sleep. Clear as day. Tomas, don't go near the water. The morning after, she didn't remember the dream. Didn't remember me again either. She called me that kind boy who brings soup, and offered me her wedding ring in thanks. It was her high school class ring. She never married. I took it gently, set it on the side table, and excused myself before I broke. There's something no one tells you about this disease. It doesn't just rob memory. It robs meaning. Her stories, her rituals, the inside jokes we'd pass back and forth over morning coffee, gone. Replaced by half-lucid fragments, and names that didn't fit in our shared world. But I was still here. I had to be. She once feared I'd never be responsible. She used to say I'd get swallowed whole by my own recklessness. That I'd leave everything behind just like my father. Maybe she was right, once. But not now. Now I was brushing her hair, clipping her nails, mixing her medication into orange juice so she wouldn't taste the bitterness. I was learning to live in her shifting reality. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside me, too. That dream name, it scratched at something behind my ribs, something I couldn't name. And then, 3 nights later, I saw it. I was dozing on the couch when I felt it, the house, going quiet in a way that wasn't natural. No pipes, no creaking boards. Just stillness. I found her standing in the hallway. Eyes open. Awake, but not. Her lips moved soundlessly. "Ma?" I whispered. She turned. But her eyes weren't hers. She stared through me and said, "Tomas, you're not supposed to be here." "Not yet." My breath hitched. I'm Danny," I managed. "No," she whispered. "That was the name I gave you." She stepped closer. "But that's not who you were before." I don't remember much after that. Just the feeling of standing on the edge of something I couldn't see, like a dream that's about to turn into a nightmare, or the split second before a car crash. She blinked, and just like that it was gone. Her face softened. "Oh, Danny. What are you doing up?" I told her I was getting water. She nodded, touched my face like she used to when I was sick, and shuffled back into her room. That night, I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up. I wrote the name Tomas on a piece of paper, again and again. The ink started to blur. This wasn't just a dream. It wasn't just a name. It was a thread. And I had to follow it. The next morning I couldn't stop staring at the word I'd written. Tomas. It looked wrong and familiar all at once. Like the way déjà vu feels, close enough to believe, distant enough to doubt. I sat at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at the loops and lines in my own handwriting like they might rearrange into meaning. The coffee had gone cold, and the smell of it made me nauseous. I'd hardly slept. My body felt like it had passed through something, not a night, but a threshold. When I finally stood, I moved without thinking, retracing steps that weren't mine. I went to the attic. It took me 20 minutes to find the key to the old pull-down ladder. I hadn't been up there in years. The last time was for Christmas lights in '08, when Mom was still sharp, still insisting on decorating every corner of the house like we lived in a Macy's display window. The attic groaned as I climbed. Dust kissed my face in clouds, and the air turned syrup thick. I clicked the little pull chain for the single bulb overhead and squinted into the dim space. Boxes. Dozens of them. Labeled in her cursive, books, Danny's school stuff, photos, baby clothes. And one, pushed to the far wall, just said, "Jude." I froze. Jude. That was one of the names she'd mumbled in her sleep. I remembered it, clear as a bell. I thought maybe it was from a Beatles song. But seeing it here, on a box tucked away from everything else, sent a cold finger down my spine. I pulled it toward me. Inside, under a pile of moth-eaten blankets, was a stack of yellowed folders, old Polaroids, and a cracked photo album. On the very top, a hospital bracelet, brittle with age. The name printed on it was Jude Ellison. November 17th, 1975. Male. Infant ICU. My birthday is November 17th. But I was born in 1986. I sat down hard, knees shaking. My thoughts were a riot of questions, but I forced myself to keep digging. There were baby pictures, black and white. A child that looked just like me. Unsettlingly so. Same ears, same squinting eyes, same dimple in the left cheek. The only difference was a faint birthmark over the collarbone. I touched my own neck instinctively. Nothing there. One of the folders contained a stack of hospital discharge papers. Several pages were missing, and what remained had sections blacked out. Still, I saw one note clearly. Mother declined to disclose father's name. Child discharged into maternal custody. No further documentation filed. At the bottom was a date, January 1976. I flipped through the rest, notes from a social worker, a few handwritten journal entries from Mom. The handwriting was younger. Nervous. January 20th. He cries all the time. I don't think he recognizes me. Sometimes I look at him and feel like he's someone else. Not mine. I hate that thought. I hate it. February 5th. I dreamt he was drowning. In a lake I didn't recognize. Someone kept calling him Tomas. Not Jude. Tomas. I stopped reading. I felt like I'd just discovered a sibling I'd never met. Or worse. That I had met him. That I'd been him. And that nothing I remembered was real. I closed the box and carried it downstairs, heart slamming like it wanted to break out of my chest. When I stepped into the living room, she was sitting up, alert. Too alert. She saw the box and her face drained of color. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In the attic." She stared at me, her eyes shining with something between grief and fury. "You shouldn't have opened it." "Why?" I asked. "Who's Jude?" She didn't answer. "Who's Tomas?" Her lips trembled. She looked away. "I told them to burn it all. I told them I didn't want the past." I moved closer. "Mom, what happened to Jude?" She looked up at me then, and in her eyes was something I hadn't seen in a long time, complete lucidity. "You died." I didn't speak. She nodded, her eyes now brimming with tears. "In that life you died. 3 months old. Crib death, they said. But I know better. I felt it happen before it did." The room was silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. She pressed her palm to her chest. "When I was pregnant with you again, 10 years later, I didn't think I could carry it. I was sure it would happen again. But then, something strange happened. When you were born, you looked like him. Like Jude." My mouth was dry. "You think I'm him?" "No." "Yes." "Not exactly." She smiled, a fragile, broken thing. "I think you're both." Later that night, she fell asleep while I read to her. I sat there long after, trying to make sense of it. Could a mother grieve so deeply that she blurred the boundaries of memory and reality? Or was there something else? I remembered something I'd read once about Tibetan reincarnation beliefs. That children could carry pieces of past lives. That sometimes they remembered things they never learned. Sometimes they spoke in voices that weren't their own. I'd always had strange dreams as a kid. Water. Gardens. Someone calling to me. And now, she was dreaming of me, but not as me. As someone older. As someone lost. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of humming. I followed it. She was standing at the back door, barefoot in her nightgown, staring into the yard. Her hand rested on the doorknob. "Mom?" I whispered. She turned. "The garden's back." "What?" Her eyes shone with that same dreamlike clarity. "Come with me, Tomas." Before I could stop her, she stepped outside. I followed, heart pounding. But there was no garden. Just the patchy lawn, the cherry tree, the broken bird bath. Yet she walked across the yard like there was a path. Like she could see something I couldn't. She stopped, turned to me, and pointed. "Right there," she said. That's where you found the feather. I looked at the grass. Nothing but weeds. You told me it was from a phoenix. You said you'd come back. You promised. I felt something inside me crack. The world tilted slightly. A strange dizziness flooded my limbs. I reached down, trembling, and brushed aside the grass. Nothing. Then, just beneath the dirt, I saw something. A small white feather. Perfect. Untouched by time. She smiled. And for a moment, I wasn't Danny. I wasn't Jude. I was Tomas. I didn't know what that meant yet, or why she remembered that version of me so clearly. But I knew I had to find out. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't just memory. It was something older. Something trying to return. The feather sat on my nightstand, still flecked with earth, like proof I didn't know how to use. I stared at it for hours. Tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, just a bird's feather that drifted down into the lawn, maybe dug up by a squirrel, maybe nothing at all. But some part of me, some wordless, quiet part that didn't operate on logic, knew better. Mom had led me straight to it. In the dark. In her sleep. And she'd called me Tomas again. Like she always did, when her mind stepped out of time. The next morning, she was worse. She didn't recognize me at all. Wouldn't let me near her. Sat in her chair with her knees pulled up, whispering, "I want to go home. Where's my mama?" Over and over like a broken record. I called Dr. Patel. She said these dips were normal. Lucidity comes in waves, she said. Sometimes a person rallies, then crashes again. The brain's rewiring old roads, but they don't always lead anywhere. I hung up feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. By mid-afternoon, I was at the lake. I didn't know why. It wasn't near the house. I had to drive 20 minutes into the edge of the county, past all the places I hadn't visited since high school. But something tugged at me, the way Mom had said it, in her sleep, weeks ago. "Tomas, don't go near the water." The lake sat heavy and wide under a slate-gray sky. The wind moved through the trees like it was whispering secrets. I parked by the edge, walked down the cracked asphalt path to the dock. No one else was there. I sat. Watched the ripples. And then I saw it. A boy. He stood just at the tree line, half obscured by leaves. His back was turned to me, but something in his posture, his stillness, made my heart thud in a way I couldn't explain. "Hey!" I called. He didn't move. The wind rustled again, louder this time, almost a voice. I stepped off the dock and walked slowly toward the trees. "Are you lost?" He turned. And I stopped breathing. Because he looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough that my knees went weak. He was maybe 9 years old. Same chin. Same eyebrows. A jagged scar across his temple. I never had that. Not in this life. But I knew that scar. He stared at me like he'd been waiting a very long time. "Do I know you?" I asked. He tilted his head. "You forgot." The wind surged again, pulling at my coat. The trees seemed to lean in, listening. "What did I forget?" I asked, voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just turned and walked into the woods. I chased him. Of course I did. But when I reached the spot where he'd been, he was gone. I searched the trees, called out, even checked the edge of the lake. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a whisper. Just the thick silence of the forest, and the sound of my own pulse hammering in my ears. But I knew what I saw. And I knew, somehow, that he was me. Or a version of me. A memory. A ghost. A life that didn't finish what it started. That night, I found an old journal of mine in a box under my childhood bed. Half the pages were torn out, but I flipped through it anyway, hoping something would click. Most entries were just dumb kid stuff. Ms. Dirksen gave us a pop quiz and I know I failed. I hate fractions. Mom made grilled cheese again. She always burns mine. Then, near the middle, written in a Messier hand. I had the dream again. The boy in the water. He keeps saying my name wrong. He says Tomas. But that's not my name. I don't think he knows that he's not real. I stared at the entry so long my eyes started to water. I didn't remember writing it. Didn't remember that dream. Didn't remember him. And yet, it was like finding my own fingerprints in a room I'd never been inside. I brought the journal to Mom the next day. She was quiet, more present than she'd been in days. She held the book in her hands like it was something fragile. Precious. I think I've seen this before, she murmured. You gave it to me, I said. For my 8th birthday. She nodded slowly. You used to write stories. About a place you called the Between. My heart jumped. I don't remember that. She looked up. Her eyes were watery but clear. You said it was where lost things go. Not people. Things. Names. Toys. Dreams. You said it was the place underneath the world, where things live until they're needed again. A chill moved through me. Did I ever write about a boy named Tomas? She blinked. No, she whispered. But when you were little, you used to talk to him. That night, she had another episode. She wandered into the backyard again, barefoot in the dew-wet grass. This time she was humming a lullaby I'd never heard before. A strange melody that circled itself like a spiral staircase. I followed her carefully. Didn't want to startle her. She stopped by the cherry tree and looked up at the moon. He's waking up again, she said. Who is? Tomas. He never liked to sleep. Said the dreams were too loud. I stepped closer. Mom, do you know who he is? She turned to me. Her eyes weren't scared. They were knowing. You are. And you're not. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled something out. A necklace. Simple, silver, with a small circle pendant etched with a symbol I didn't recognize, an overlapping spiral and eye. I stared at it. What is that? I wore it when I was pregnant with you, she said. I thought it would keep you safe. Safe from what? She hesitated. From forgetting. She placed it in my hand. I think you're going to need it now. Later, after I put her to bed, I examined the necklace under the lamp. The symbol tugged at something deep, something I couldn't reach. I traced it with my thumb and felt a flicker behind my eyes, like a light bulb stuttering to life. Suddenly I remembered something that wasn't mine. A room. Stone walls. Candles flickering. And a voice, low and soft. When the time comes, you'll remember the name. You'll know what to do. I dropped the necklace. My breath came in gasps. The room felt like it was tilting. Because in that memory, if it was a memory, I wasn't me. I was someone else entirely. I picked up the necklace and put it around my neck. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. I felt like I was coming back to it. There's something happening. Something deep and old curling beneath this life like a second skin. My mother, whatever's left of her, is the only person who seems to remember it. Even as her mind fades, something underneath is shining through. Something stronger than time, stronger than death, stronger than names. And I think that's the point. We don't just lose people. We lose pieces of ourselves we didn't know were borrowed. But what if they come back? What if they find their way home? I don't know who Tomas is. Not yet. But I think I'm starting to remember what he lost. And I'm not sure what happens when I remember everything. But I know I'm not alone anymore. He's in the water. He's in the dreams. And he's waiting. There's a kind of silence that settles right before a storm, pregnant with static, not quite loud but not quiet either. That was the feeling in the house the next morning. I woke up with the necklace pressed against my chest, still wearing the same clothes. The journal lay open beside me, flipped to the page with the entry about Tomas and the boy in the water. Only now, there was something else. A new line. Written in a different hand. He knows you're close. I froze. Ran my fingers over the ink. Fresh. Still slightly damp. I hadn't written it. I knew I hadn't. I checked the windows. Still locked. Doors? Bolted. The house was still. Too still. And then, just at the edge of hearing, I caught it. Humming. Mom's lullaby. Not coming from her room, but from somewhere deeper. Below. The basement. I almost didn't go. Every part of my body screamed against it, like I'd stumbled into the prelude of some fairy tale where the warning is obvious and always ignored. But I knew I had to follow it. That lullaby, that melody, it wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a memory calling itself home. I opened the basement door. Each step down felt like shedding a layer of myself. Like I was descending into something older than the house. It was pitch black at the bottom, but the second my foot hit the last step, the old bulb flickered to life on its own. That's when I saw the wall. A mural. Hidden behind a shelf I never thought to move before. Crude, hand-painted, but unmistakably deliberate. A circular symbol, matching the one on the necklace, painted in charcoal and ochre. Surrounding it were dozens of names. Some familiar, Mary, Eva, Jude. Some strange, Alara, vexed Tomo. And in the center, Tomas. Below it, a single line, written in red ink. Names are keys. They don't unlock doors. They unlock people. My throat went dry. I touched the name. The paint flaked slightly beneath my fingers. And just for a moment, I remembered drowning. It hit like a wave, cold, total, suffocating. I wasn't in the basement anymore. I was in the lake. Not today's lake. Another place, another time. The sky overhead was darker. The trees older. No buildings. No roads. Just wilderness and water and the taste of iron in my mouth. I was young. Maybe 12. I saw myself from outside myself, arms thrashing, lungs aching, a voice calling out from the shoreline. Tomas! Don't forget your name! And then, nothing. I woke up on the concrete floor. Dizzy. Gasping. My fingers were still touching the painted wall. There was blood on them. My nose had bled. Maybe more. I stumbled up the stairs, heart slamming so hard I thought it might knock me unconscious. Every sound in the house had gone thin and sharp, like I'd tuned into a different frequency. When I reached the top step, Mom was waiting. She was standing in the hallway, eyes wide open. But something was wrong. She wasn't seeing me, she was seeing through me. You opened it, she said. What is this? I asked, voice hoarse. What's happening to me? She smiled then. And it broke my heart. Because it wasn't her smile. It was someone else's. Sad. Ancient. You're not remembering, she said. You're being remembered. She collapsed after that. I caught her before she hit the ground. Her body went slack in my arms. I carried her to the couch, covered her with a blanket, called Dr. Patel in a panic. She told me to bring her in the next morning for observation, maybe another scan. But I already knew. It wasn't her body failing. It was her mind trying to carry too many timelines. That night I dreamed again. But this time, I chose to go under. I found myself in the between. I knew it instinctively. The sky above was not quite sky, more like velvet rippling with soft light. The ground was moss, endless and pulsing beneath my bare feet. And everywhere there were doors. Hundreds of them. Some floating. Some half-formed. Some glowing. And at the center stood the boy. Tomas. He looked older now. Closer to my current age. As if time blurred in this place. He wore the necklace I had on. His hand touched the same symbol etched into the pendant. You're late, he said. What is this place? I asked. He gave a crooked smile. A waiting room for forgotten selves. Are you me? He nodded. And not me. We walked among the doors. He told me things I didn't want to believe, about reincarnation, about lives that echoed through bloodlines. About names being more than labels. That they're seeds. That some names grow people. He said my mother had known. Not all of it, not consciously, but enough. She'd carried the weight of 2 lives in one timeline. It had fractured her. She saw me in you before you even spoke your first word, he said. She remembered. But she didn't know how. I don't understand. You don't have to. You just have to remember. That's the price. The price for what? He stopped. And pointed to a door. Old. Carved with the symbol. My name etched beneath it. Tomas Ellison. You left something behind, he said. And now it wants to come home. I woke up screaming. My shirt was soaked in sweat. And the necklace burned against my chest like a brand. When I ran to check on Mom, I found her sitting up, awake and waiting. Like she knew. Like she'd been waiting for me to come back. I found him, I whispered. She nodded. Her hands were shaking. Then it's time to go. Go where? Her eyes didn't waver. To the place between the name and the boy. We left just before dawn. No breakfast. No small talk. Just the sound of her slippers on the hardwood as she moved through the house like someone being pulled by an invisible thread. She didn't pack anything. Just put on her coat, the old green one with the torn pocket, and clutched a folded photograph in one hand. I didn't ask what it was. Something told me it wasn't mine to see yet. I helped her into the passenger seat. Her fingers were trembling, not from fear but something else. Anticipation. Recognition. Like she knew exactly where we were going, even if the roads had changed. I waited until we'd passed the edge of town to speak. Mom, I said, voice barely louder than the hum of the tires. What is this place? She looked out the window, eyes unfocused. Where I lost you. The first time. The drive took an hour. Up winding hills I didn't remember, through trees that grew too close to the road, until the asphalt gave way to gravel and then to nothing. A path, barely wide enough for a car, led into a thicket of pine and cedar. She pointed. There. I stopped the car. We walked the rest. Her steps were slow but steady. I stayed close, ready to catch her if she slipped. But she never did. Every footfall was precise, like muscle memory was guiding her. And then, just as the sun crested the horizon, we stepped through the trees. And found the garden. It shouldn't have been there. I'd never seen it before. Not in this life. Not in this version of the world. But it was there. Overgrown, wild yet structured. Stone arches leaned into one another, half swallowed by vines. A fountain stood in the center, cracked and dry. There were benches made of iron and wood, warped by time but unmistakably placed. Not random. And around the edges of it all, carved into stone markers, were names. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. One stopped me cold. Tomas Ellison, returned, not replaced. My legs buckled. I sat on the nearest bench, staring at the engraving until my vision blurred. What is this place? I asked again. Mom sat beside me. Her breath came shallow. It's where I buried the memory of you. I turned to her. I don't understand. She reached into her coat and handed me the photo. It was black and white. Faded. A woman holding a baby, swaddled, peaceful, eyes shut tight. The woman was her. The baby wasn't me. Not exactly. But close enough. She whispered. That was the first time you were born. She told me everything. In halting, dreamlike pieces. Like she was reading from a book with half the pages torn out. She'd had a child when she was 19. A boy. Me. But not the version I became. He died crib death, they told her. But she never believed it. Said he had too much life in his eyes to go quiet like that. She buried him in a private plot on her family's land. Right here. This garden. A secret place her grandmother used to bring her to when she was a child. She visited it every week for a year. And then, one day, she stopped coming. Because she had a dream. She dreamt she was walking through this garden, and saw the boy again, older now. Alive. Holding a feather in his hand. He looked at her and said, Don't grieve. I'm coming back. She thought it was madness. But 10 years later, she gave birth to me. Same eyes. Same birth date. Same laugh. She never told anyone. Never even told herself, really. But the day I spoke my first word, she felt it. That thread pulling tight. That echo. The name before the name. Tomas. I sat with the photo in my lap, wind brushing my face like a hand made of air. My heart felt like it had cracked open, wide enough for something ancient to crawl out. I think I've seen this place before, I whispered. She didn't answer. She was staring at the fountain now. Her eyes wet. Her hands clutched together. Mom? She blinked slowly. This is where the forgetting began, she said. And then she stood, walked to the center of the garden, and touched the dry fountain's rim. As her fingers traced the stone, I heard it. Water. Not loud. Not gushing. But unmistakable. The sound of trickling, from deep below. And then the whisper. Tomas, wake up. It wasn't her voice. It came from beneath the fountain. I ran to her, heart racing, unsure what I was chasing anymore, truth, memory, or madness. But when I reached her, she turned and said, It's time for you to remember what you gave up. She touched my chest, right over the necklace. And I fell. Not physically. Inward. Suddenly I was him. Tomas. Not just in name, but in bone and blood and memory. I remembered the between. The doors. The garden in full bloom. I remembered choosing to forget, to step out of one life and into another. To be born again, not as who I was, but as who she needed me to be. Because she'd broken. Because she needed another chance. Because I loved her. So I came back. But something went wrong. Too many names. Too many echoes. My mind fractured across timelines, unable to carry the weight of what I left behind. And hers broke trying to hold both. When I came back to myself, I was on the ground. She was lying beside me, head on my shoulder. Eyes closed. Peaceful. I touched her cheek. It was still warm. But she was gone. The garden was quiet again. No water. No whispers. Just wind and light and the faint scent of cherry blossoms, even though none were blooming. I buried the photograph beneath her bench. Marked the stone with her name. Margaret Ellison, she remembered anyway. And then I sat beside her grave, clutching the necklace. I didn't cry. I just whispered, Thank you? Because now I understood. She hadn't forgotten me. She'd been carrying me all along. I stayed until nightfall. The stars blinked awake one by one, like old friends. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't frighten me. It felt like coming home. I stayed in the garden until I couldn't feel my hands. The cold seeped in slow, like a tide, but I didn't move. Couldn't. Something in me needed to sit in that stillness, to let it wash over every version of myself I could remember. Danny. Tomas. The boy in the water. The name on the stone. The second chance. The echo. It wasn't just grief that rooted me there. It was all. Because I knew now, I had returned. I had been carried through time, through lives, through memory, into this shape, into this body, into her arms. And she had remembered enough of me to bring me back. Even as everything else slipped away. Even as the disease cracked her open. She held on to me. When I finally rose, the moon was climbing through the branches like it didn't want to be seen. I walked back to the car without looking back. The key felt heavier in my hand than it should have. Starting the engine felt wrong, like I was breaking something sacred. I drove home slowly. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't want the world to feel normal again. The house was too quiet when I got back. Her slippers still sat by the door. The throw blanket still draped over the arm of the couch, folded the way she always insisted. Like a proper rectangle, not some wild triangle nonsense. There was a bowl in the sink. Her teacup beside it. The lights were still on. She'd left the world mid-breath. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled the journal toward me again. The page with Tomas's name. The line written in unfamiliar handwriting, "He knows you're close." Another line had appeared below it. I didn't see it at first. It was faint, like it had been written in graphite and rubbed away, then decided to come back. "Now you are the one who must remember." The words shifted as I stared at them. They weren't a message. They were a task. I didn't sleep. I made coffee instead. Burned toast. Let it sit cold on the counter. And then I opened every box in the attic. Not looking for keepsakes this time. Looking for clues. I laid everything out across the living room floor: photos, notes, the hospital bracelet, the Jude file, the class ring, even a cassette tape labeled, "For Danny someday." I stared at it for a long time. Then I found the old tape player. Press play. Her voice came through the speaker like a ghost crawling across wires. "Hi, sweetheart." Pause. A breath. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't get to explain everything in the way I hoped. Maybe because I couldn't. Maybe because time got greedy and took more of me than I meant to give. But I needed you to have this." The room felt smaller. The air sharper. "You always asked why I never talked about your father. The truth is, I didn't know how to tell you the story without sounding insane. Because you didn't just lose your father. You lost yourself." Static crackled. "I was 19 when I lost my first son. They called it SIDS. They gave me pamphlets and pills. But I knew the truth. He left. He didn't die. He left the way people slip through cracks in the world, quiet and unnoticed. And he came back. As you." A pause. A long one. "You looked at me on your first birthday and said, 'I remember the boat.'" My chest caved. "You weren't just Annie. You were Tomas. And I don't care if anyone believes me, because I remember. I remember the moment I knew. It was like hearing a song I hadn't heard since childhood, but somehow still knowing all the words. The tape whirred for a few seconds. I tried to raise you the best I could. Tried to let you have a normal life. But I think part of you always knew. The water. The dreams. The way you used to sleepwalk toward the lake when you were small." Another pause. "If I'm gone now, I need you to know, I didn't forget you. Not ever. I just started to remember too much. And my mind couldn't carry it." Her voice cracked. "You have to go back. Finish what was unfinished. Remember who you were. Not for me. For you. And then, come find me when the sky is folded." Click. Silence. I didn't cry. There was a strange calm in me now. I looked at the necklace still hanging from my neck. The symbol, spiral, and I seemed to pulse faintly in the lamplight. Not glowing, not flickering. Just alive. I closed my eyes. And remembered the door. I stood in the between. Again. The velvet sky. The moss beneath my feet. The doors floating in space. But something was different. This time, the door with my name on it was open. And inside, it was raining. I stepped through. Found myself standing at the edge of a river. Wide. Silent. Not water, exactly, something thicker, darker, like time in liquid form. Across from me stood the boy. Tomas. His eyes locked on mine. "You remember?" he said. I nodded. "I do." He smiled, and it was bittersweet. The smile of someone who had waited lifetimes to be recognized. "It's time to make a choice." He pointed behind him. A boat waited at the edge of the river. Small. Wooden. The kind used to cross waters in old stories. "I can go," he said. "Finally. Now that you know who I was." "Where does it take you?" I asked. He shrugged. "Where the names go when they're no longer needed." I looked at my hands. They felt heavy. Real. "I thought I was you." "You are." He stepped forward. "But you're also something new. A bridge. Between what was and what could be." He placed something in my hand. The feather. But it wasn't white anymore. It was gold. warm, alive. I looked up. He was gone. When I woke, I was still holding it. The real one. Still small. Still delicate. But it felt different now. Like it had chosen me. Mom's funeral was small. Just me, the hospice nurse who cried harder than I expected, and the neighbor who used to bring her rhubarb pie. I buried her with the necklace. Pressed the feather into her palm before the casket closed. She remembered anyway. I whispered. Even when the world didn't. Weeks passed. The garden's location faded from maps again. I tried to return. Couldn't find it. I don't think I'm meant to. Not yet. But sometimes, when I sleep, I see her there. In the garden. Sitting by the fountain. Hair braided down her back. She smiles at me. And calls me by a name no one else remembers. There are moments, after loss, when the world forgets to move. The days don't feel like days. They're airless rooms stuck in loops. Open drawer, forget what you were looking for, find a sock you haven't seen since you were 13, cry for reasons you don't understand. I lived like that for a while. Not grieving. Not really living. Just echoing. But something had changed in me. A thread had been pulled, and now it tugged every time I ignored it. The necklace was gone, buried with her, but I still felt it. Not on my chest. In it. Like it had worked its way inward. Into the body. Into the name. And one night, about 3 weeks after the funeral, it pulled again. Hard. It started with a whisper. In a dream. But not a whisper to me. A whisper from me. I stood in front of a mirror, and my reflection didn't match. Not exactly. His face was mine, but the eyes were darker, sharper, full of a sadness I hadn't yet earned. He pressed his hand to the glass. And mouthed the words. There's something buried in your ribs. I woke with chest pain. Not panic. Not grief. Something sharper. I stood in front of the mirror, shirtless, pale in the bathroom light. My eyes searched my own skin like it might confess something. And just under the left side of my chest, near the collarbone, I saw it. Faint. Familiar. A mark. A birthmark. But it hadn't always been there. It matched the one from the old photo. The one on Jude, my first self. The baby that never grew up. I touched it. Felt warmth. Then something deeper. Something turning. I don't know why I thought to try the attic again. Maybe I expected more boxes to appear, or a message scratched into the beams. But what I found was simpler. The box labeled Jude, the one I had searched through dozens of times, now had something taped to the bottom. A folded page. Notebook paper, torn at the edge. Faded blue lines. Written in my mother's unmistakable cursive. If he remembers this, it means he's ready. There's an archive. Beneath the house. Beneath the skin. It remembers the names we've been, even when we don't. Even when we forget. You'll need to return to the place between dreams and drowning. That's where it waits. The memory that remembers you back. There was a key taped to the paper. Old. Brass. Heavy. But we didn't have a basement door that locked. Unless it wasn't a door in the house. The garden. The fountain. The sound of water the moment she touched the stone. I remembered it now, clear as sunrise. She hadn't just shown me where she buried the memory. She'd unlocked something. I went back. Used coordinates I'd saved in my phone from the day of the funeral, though the GPS kept failing once I got close. The trees seemed thicker now. The trail unfamiliar. But I felt the thread tugging again, steady and patient. The garden was still there. Wilder now. Overgrown. The fountain was still dry. The benches sunken into the moss. But the center stone had shifted. Cracked down the middle. Just enough to slide the key inside. When I turned it, the earth hummed. And a section of the fountain slid open with a low grinding sound. Stairs beneath. Spiral. Dark. Breathing. I didn't hesitate. Descended with the key still in my palm. And as I moved downward, the walls began to change. First stone. Then etched stone. Then carved names. Hundreds. Thousands. Each glowing faintly as I passed. Mary. Eva. Tomas. Jude. Names I didn't recognize. Names that sounded like incantations. Names that felt like me. And then, finally, at the bottom of the stairwell, Daniel Ellison. Lit from within. Pulsing. Waiting. The room beyond was circular. Walls lined with mirrors, each one slightly distorted, like carnival glass. But when I looked into them, I didn't see my face twisted or warped. I saw versions. One mirror showed me at age 5, weeping in the corner of my preschool classroom, holding a drawing of a boat. I hadn't remembered that moment in years. Another showed me at 16, standing at the edge of the lake at dusk, not knowing why I felt such a terrible need to jump in and never come back. Another, older. Unfamiliar. A man in a gray tunic, barefoot, standing in the middle of a burning library, clutching a book with a spiral on the cover. And in each version, the eyes matched. Mine. In the center of the room was a plinth. Upon it, a book. Bound in dark leather. No title. I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of names. But not written. Etched. As if carved by fingertip. And near the back, 3 pages stuck together. When I pried them apart, I saw the one word repeated like a heartbeat. Tomas. 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 And then, beneath it, the boy who drowned so someone else could breathe. I dropped the book. Staggered back. And then the light changed. Every mirror flickered. Glowed. And the names on the walls began to whisper. Soft. Insistent. Remember me. Return me. Release me. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes. Could have been centuries. Because in that room, time wasn't time. It was weight. And I was full of it. When I came back to myself, the book was gone. So were the whispers. The light had dimmed. But I could feel the archive now, not as a place, but as a presence. Inside me. Like a well. Like a spine. And every name it held was not just memory. It was possibility. I climbed back into the world changed. The thread no longer pulled. Because it was no longer necessary. It was in me. Woven through bone and name and breath. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a man haunted by past selves. I felt like a man built by them. Now, when I sleep, I don't dream of drowning. I dream of gathering. Of doors opening. Of a boy in the between smiling, because he's not alone anymore. And in the morning, when I wake, I say every name I remember. Not out loud. But in thanks. Because I am not just Daniel. Not just Tomas. Not just Jude. I am the archive. The one who came back. And now, finally, I know what to do. They say when someone dies, the first thing you forget is the sound of their voice. That wasn't true for me. My mother's voice didn't fade, it grew louder. Not in the way you hear sound, but in the way memory hums just beneath your skin. She'd always been good at staying quiet in the world but loud in the soul. Now she speaks when I need her to. When I touch the garden gate. When I turn the page of the dream journal. When I stand in front of the mirror and ask, "Who am I today?" And sometimes, when I close my eyes and breathe just right, I swear I can hear her whisper. "You were never just one name, sweetheart. You were always the story itself." Since unlocking the archive, things have been different. Not dramatic. Not supernatural, not exactly. Just shifted. I'll be walking down a street I've known since childhood, and suddenly remember a version of it with gas lamps and horses. I'll smell old paper and jasmine and recall binding books by hand in a life I never lived. I'll hear a child crying in a grocery store and know in my bones, how to calm him, because I remember being the father of a boy with that exact cry. It's like my life has gained weight. Not heaviness. Depth. I carry echoes now. Not burdens. Not ghosts. Names. One morning, I woke up with a sentence in my head. Clear. Precise. There's another one like you. I didn't know what it meant. Until the dreams returned. It started small, flashes. A girl standing in a hallway of mirrors. Her eyes were storm gray. Her name flickered in and out like a faulty signal. Elira. Or Elena. Or El. She was calling to me, but the words weren't sound. They were pull. The same kind of pull that had led me to the garden. The archive. The between. But this was different. It wasn't memory. It was invitation. I followed it the only way I knew how, through dreams. I began journaling again, nightly, obsessively, recording every detail no matter how fractured. The girl always appeared near water. A shoreline. A flood. Once, a mirror-smooth ocean under a blood-red sky. In each dream, she turned to me with the same question. What did you remember that I couldn't? I didn't have an answer. Not until I reopened the mirror room in the archive. Yes, reopened. Because after that first ascent, the garden disappeared again. But the thread stayed in my chest, and I followed it inward, found the room inside myself. It sounds impossible. I know that. But at this point, impossibility feels like a matter of perspective. In that space of spirals and glass, a new mirror had appeared. Not warped. Not cracked. Just still. And when I looked into it, I saw her. Elle. She was real. Somewhere in the world, she walked in her own skin, holding fractured pieces of herself, just like I had. And the archive, whatever it was, had started bridging us. Because remembering isn't a one-person act. It's communal. Every name we carry was spoken by someone. Every echo begs to be answered. I don't know how long I stood in front of her mirror. Minutes. Hours. A season. But I knew what I had to do. Reach her. Wake her. The same way my mother had unknowingly woken me, through fragments, rituals, familiar grief. Through the unbearable knowing that something was missing but not knowing what. The same way Tomas had whispered to me through dream and water. So I left messages. Not letters. Not texts. But keys. I went to places the dreams pointed me to. A library in Philadelphia. A bus stop in rural Utah. A crumbling cathedral in southern Portugal. At each place, I left behind something small. A page torn from my journal, folded and tucked inside a copy of The Little Prince. A white feather, wrapped in twine, sealed in a mason jar and buried in the soft soil beneath a cedar. A drawing of the spiral eye symbol, carved into the wood of a pew. Each item left in places where she might one day remember to look. Each item marked with the same phrase. You are not the only one who remembers. And then, I waited. But waiting doesn't mean standing still. In the time since, I've begun to live again. In the truest sense. Not as Daniel. Not as Tomas. But as something larger. A keeper. A storyteller. A kind of midwife for lost names. People come to me now. Not because they know what I am. But because something in them recognizes me. A barista at a downtown cafe who said she dreamed of me pulling her from a fire in 1812. A little boy at a park who pointed at me and said, You used to be my uncle. Been asked to hold my hand? An elderly man in a nursing home who gripped my wrist and whispered, You came back. You actually came back. They don't know what it means. I don't always either. But I smile. I listen. Sometimes I remember with them. Sometimes I just bear witness. Because that's what we are now. Rememberers. And then, one night, it happened. I woke to find a letter on my windowsill. No stamp. No return address. Just my name written in delicate script I didn't recognize, until I did. Tomas. Inside. A single line. I found the last door. Meet me where the sky folds. And beneath that, a pressed flower. Cherry blossom. She remembered. She remembered. I don't know yet what happens next. But I know where I'm going. Back to the garden. Back to the fountain. Back to the between. Because this story, this vast, aching, miraculous story, is not just mine anymore. It belongs to the ones who remember what the world asked them to forget. To the ones who wake. And above all, to the ones who still know that names aren't just what we're given, they're what we become. It had been weeks since I received the letter. Weeks of knowing. Of not knowing. Of walking through the world as if I were already halfway elsewhere. I reread it 100 times. Each curve of ink. Each flick of the pen on the word Tomas felt like a fingerprint from a life I hadn't yet lived, or perhaps one I had and simply left behind in the folds. I found the last door. Meet me where the sky folds. There was no map. No date. Just a flower. A pressed cherry blossom, its petals still clinging to color. A piece of spring preserved in time. I didn't need instructions. Because I knew where she meant. Not with my mind, but with the thread inside me, the one that pulled and sang and shimmered any time a truth was close. Where the sky folds. The garden. When I arrived, it wasn't just overgrown. It was changed. The air shimmered at the edge of the trees, like heat above asphalt, though it was cold enough to see my breath. The path was gone. The stones buried. The fountain nowhere in sight. But I stepped forward anyway. Because I could feel it now, not just the garden, but the between beneath it. The layered world. The one that runs parallel to this one like a second heartbeat. Each step made a sound that didn't match the ground. Softer. Echoless. And then, without fanfare, without warning, I passed through. Like crossing a veil I hadn't known was there. The garden bloomed around me. Fully. Vibrantly. Alive in a way that made me ache. Not because it was beautiful, though it was. But because it felt whole. Like it had never been abandoned. Like it had always been waiting, just beyond the reach of memory. Cherry trees stretched overhead, blossoms drifting in slow spirals. The fountain gushed with water so clear it looked like light. And in the center of it all, beneath an archway of woven vines and silver leaves, she waited. Or Elira. Or maybe something else entirely. She turned as I approached, and her eyes were as I remembered them in the mirrors, storm gray and ancient. Worn from lifetimes. Softened by recognition. We didn't speak at first. We just stood across from one another, the garden humming around us, as if it, too, had been waiting for this. Finally, she stepped forward and held out her hand. Palm up. In it, another feather. Gold. Twin to mine. I reached into my coat, pulled out the one I'd kept since the day my mother led me to it. They didn't just match. They glowed when brought together. You remembered? I whispered. She nodded. So did you. We stood in silence for a long moment, not needing to ask how. The archive had brought us both to the same edge. Our names were just doors. We had finally opened them wide enough to meet. She looked toward the fountain. There's something here, she said. Something older than both of us. I followed her gaze. The water was shifting now. Not rippling, moving. Spelling. Writing itself. Letters rising and fading in delicate curls, like breath on a mirror. And when we stood close enough, we could read it. The first name is not the true one. The last name is the one you return to. Elle took my hand. It felt like finishing a sentence I didn't know I'd started. And suddenly, the sky folded. I mean that literally. Above us, the air split at the seams. Light bent. A crease formed in the horizon like a page turning mid-sentence. And through it, we saw the between. Not just glimpses. Not doors. The whole thing. Unfolding. Living. A network of places where memory slept and names waited. Where versions of us lingered like footprints in wet soil. Where people long buried by time still hummed with unfinished stories. We can cross now, she said. And I knew she was right. I didn't ask where it would take us. Somehow I understood that this wasn't a destination, it was a function. We were not going to the between to escape. We were going home. To the place beneath remembering. To where the archive began. But first, one last thing. I reached into my pocket. Pulled out a small object. My mother's ring. The old high school one she tried to give me when she didn't remember who I was. I placed it at the edge of the fountain. A thank you? A promise. A grave marker for the part of me that wouldn't be returning. Then I stepped with Elle into the fold. And everything changed. There is no language for what the between truly is. No architecture. No coordinates. Just sensation. It felt like floating inside your own breath. Like listening to every version of your voice layered at once. Like touching a moment of love and grief and awe and knowing it was yours, even if you had no idea when it happened. Elle walked beside me, silent, hand in mine. We passed memories like cities. Some mine. Some hers. Some either. Or both. One version of her danced in a street of stars, fire in her hair, laughing like she'd never known pain. One version of me stood alone in a room made of books, eyes closed, whispering names that made the walls pulse. We passed them. Nodded. Carried them forward. Because that's what the remembered do. They don't stay. They gather. At the center of the between stood the archive itself. Not a building. Not a book. But a being. A consciousness. It appeared to each of us differently. To me, it was her. My mother. Not in a human form, but in the feeling of her arms around me. Her smell. Her voice saying, "You found your way, sweetheart. You brought it all home." To Elle, it was a tower made of light. We bowed to it. And we offered our feathers. It accepted them with a sound like thunder breaking into song. And in return, it gave us names. True ones. Not the ones we'd been called, but the ones we'd earned. Names like stars. Names that could not be spoken, only remembered. And then, it let us go. We woke on opposite sides of the same lake. The real one. The one from this life. I saw her across the water. She raised her hand. I raised mine. And we both smiled. Because now we understood. The story wasn't about forgetting. It never had been. It was about becoming. We are the ones who return. We are the names that remember each other. We are the breathe between lives. The echo that knows your voice before you speak. And the garden? It's still there. Always waiting. Spring came early the following year. Cherry blossoms bloomed across the yard before the frost had even let go. I stepped out barefoot one morning and watched the petals fall, soft and aimless, the way dreams scatter when you wake too fast. It had been months since the sky folded. Months since I walked through the between with Elle. Months since the archive gave us our true names, names I could no longer pronounce, only feel. And yet the world hadn't ended. The grocery stores still stocked apples. Traffic lights still blinked red at midnight. Bills still arrived with the same quiet cruelty. But I had ended. And begun again. And she, my mother, was not gone. Not really. There's a box I keep now, beside my bed. Inside. A small, flat stone from the garden. A pressed cherry blossom. A folded page from the old journal that reads, "You are not the only one who remembers." The key to the fountain. And one white feather, untouched, sealed in a glass vial. Every so often, when I feel the world tilt out of meaning, I open the box and hold one item in my hand. Not to summon anything. Not to relive. But to remind myself. We are more than our stories. We are the rememberers of each other. I see Elle often now. Not always in person. Not always in dream. But in ways that don't need presence. We're linked. Threaded. Her name is stitched into the lining of my memory now, a permanent sigil. When I pass a mirror and see my face tilt slightly before I move, I know she's near. Sometimes we sit across from each other in a cafe either of us remembers entering. Sometimes we pass each other in a memory we didn't make. Once, we sat at opposite ends of a bench in the between, surrounded by silhouettes of versions of ourselves, laughing, grieving, living, dying, all repeating the same phrase. You were the one I was waiting for. One night, I dreamed of my mother again. She was young. Younger than I'd ever seen her. Maybe 19. Hair long, wind-tangled, face lit with the reckless hope of someone who hasn't yet learned to be afraid of memory. We stood at the lake. She smiled at me and said, "It's strange." "What is?" "To look at someone you made, and see the person who saved you before you even became a mother." I felt tears sting my eyes. "You carried all of it. Even when your mind began to crack." She nodded. "It didn't crack, sweetheart. It opened." She reached out and touched a mark on my collarbone. "And from that fracture you came through." Then she stepped back. The water shimmered. And she whispered, "Tell them. That's why I'm writing this. Why I've recorded every piece. Why I've stitched it into language that doesn't always fit, but tries. Because the story doesn't end with remembering. That's where it begins. You'll meet people in your life who don't recognize themselves. Who wake up with names they never chose. Who carry grief in places no one can see. Some will forget. Some will drown. Some will go quiet. Some will walk backward through their own stories until they vanish. But some will remember. Some will look into mirrors and see strangers they used to be. Some will find keys in boxes they didn't know they buried. Some will find feathers, still white, still whole, tucked beneath the roots of a tree that only grows in dreams. And when they do, you'll be there. To say, I know. Because you are Tomas. Or El. Or Jude. Or someone with no name at all, only echoes. You are the child who was once the mother. The dream that refused to die. The silence that carried another life inside it. You are what happens after forgetting. The day my mom forgot my name, I thought I had lost everything. But I was wrong. That was the day I was given it back. Not the name on my birth certificate. Not the one my teachers mispronounced. Not the one my lovers whispered in the dark. But the one that was forged in the space between her heartbeat and mine. The one she whispered into the world before either of us had mouths to speak. The one that folded sky around itself and came back through water, through dream, through time. This is not a eulogy. This is a beginning. Because the between never closes. Because the archive never locks its doors. Because somewhere out there, someone is forgetting. And someone else is remembering for them. Because we do not vanish. We return. In the form of stories.